There is a memory you are completely certain about. Maybe it's something your mother said to you when you were 7. Maybe it's the moment you heard bad news. Maybe it's a childhood afternoon so vivid you can almost smell it. You would bet your life on it. And it's probably wrong. Not slightly off. Not missing a few details. Wrong in ways that would surprise you. Altered in color, in sequence, in meaning. And your brain did it deliberately. Every single time you remember something, the stronger the emotion attached to the memory, the harder it edits. This is not a flaw in your character. It is ancient engineering. And understanding why your brain works this way changes how you see everything. Your past, your relationships, and the story you tell yourself about who you are. Here is what most people believe about memory. They think it works like a camera. Somewhere in your brain, experiences get recorded as they happen, stored cleanly, played back when needed. The older the memory, the more dust it might collect. This model is completely wrong. Memory is not storage. Memory is reconstruction. Every time you remember something, your brain is not retrieving a file. It is rebuilding the experience from scattered fragments and filling the gaps with whatever seems most plausible given who you are right now, what you believe right now, and what you have experienced since. You are not watching a recording. You are watching a film your brain is editing in real time, and the editor has an agenda. In 1974, psychologist Elizabeth Loftus at the University of Washington ran an experiment that should have changed everything about how we understand the past. She showed participants footage of car accidents, then asked questions afterward. One group was asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? Another group was asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? One word. That is all that changed. The group that heard smashed estimated speeds nearly 25% higher than the group that heard hit. A week later, when asked whether they had seen broken glass in the footage, there was none. The smash group was twice as likely to say yes. Read that again. A single word, inserted after the fact, planted a physical object into the memory of people who had watched the same footage with their own eyes. Loftus called this the misinformation effect. And it does not only happen to strangers in a lab. It happens to eyewitnesses in courtrooms, to patients recounting trauma, to you trying to remember what happened in an argument last year. The words someone uses to ask you about a memory can physically alter the memory itself. To understand why, you need to understand what happens in your brain when you remember something. When you experience an event, it does not get stored as one unified file. Different components get encoded separately across different regions. The visual details go one place. The emotional tone goes another. The sequence, the smell, the sound of a voice, all scattered across a network. When you remember, your brain pulls these fragments back together. It stitches them into a coherent story. And during that stitching, there are always gaps, always something missing. And your brain fills them automatically using your current knowledge, your current emotional state, and the patterns you have built across a lifetime. Here is the part that changes everything. The act of remembering physically changes the memory. When a memory is retrieved, it briefly enters what neuroscientists call a labile state. It becomes unstable, open to modification. Then it gets re-encoded. What gets stored is not the original memory plus the retrieval. What gets stored is the reconstructed version, which now includes whatever your brain added during the process. Every time you revisit a memory, you are potentially editing it. The more you replay it, the more edited it becomes. The memories you have thought about most often are the ones furthest from what actually happened. But here is the part that cuts deeper. In 1995, Loftus and her colleagues convinced adult participants that they had been lost in a shopping mall as children. Using nothing but a short written description and gentle prompting across 2 interviews, 25% of participants did not just accept the false memory. They elaborated on it. They added sensory details. They described the feelings. They remembered a past that never existed. This was not happening to people with weak minds. It happened to ordinary adults under ordinary conditions. Cognitive psychologist Kimberley Wade at the University of Warwick went further. Using doctored photographs, she planted memories of hot air balloon rides that had never occurred. In a 2002 study, roughly half of participants came to believe, with full confidence, that they had taken a ride their families confirmed had never happened. Some described what the countryside looked like from above. They were remembering a view they had never seen. What this tells you is not that humans are gullible. It tells you something far more interesting about why memory works this way at all. Your brain did not evolve to be a historian. It evolved to keep you alive. Go back 100,000 years, 200,000, and consider what memory actually needed to do for a human on the African savanna. It did not need to store the past with perfect fidelity. It needed to extract patterns. It needed to predict. It needed to update. If you survived an encounter with a predator near a particular riverbank, the useful thing was not a perfect recording of what happened. The useful thing was a rule. That riverbank is dangerous. That animal is dangerous. Avoid that configuration of terrain. The specific details were less important than the lesson. Memory evolved to serve the future, not preserve the past. Reconstruction is efficient. It compresses experience into meaning. It extracts what matters and discards what does not. And when something is missing, filling the gap with a plausible substitute costs almost nothing and keeps the system running. The problem is that you live in a world where the accuracy of the past matters in ways your ancestors never encountered. Court testimony, relationship conflicts, personal identity, the question of who said what, when, and why. Your brain was not built for any of that. It was built for pattern recognition and survival. And it is still running that older, faster code inside every memory you have ever trusted. There is a concept in neuroscience called source monitoring. The ability to correctly identify where a piece of information came from. Did you witness it? Did someone tell you? Did you dream it? Did you read it? Your brain is remarkably bad at this. Psychologist Marcia Johnson at Yale University spent decades documenting source monitoring errors. Moments where people confuse the origin of their own knowledge. You remember something as a personal experience when you actually read it in a book. You remember saying something you only thought about saying. You remember a dream as though it happened while you were awake. The brain encodes the content of experiences with far more reliability than it encodes the context. And without accurate context, the content gets attributed to whatever source feels most natural, most consistent with the rest of your story. This is how two people can walk out of the same room with genuinely different memories of what occurred. Not because one of them is lying, because both of them reconstructed and reconstructed differently. The argument you are having about the past may be two honest people, each remembering accurately, neither of whom is right. Now here is where it gets strange. The memories most distorted by reconstruction are the ones that matter most to you. When something carries fear or grief or love or shame, the amygdala gets involved. Your brain's threat detection center has a direct line to the hippocampus, where memories are consolidated. Strong emotion signals, this is important, encode this deeply. And it does. Emotionally significant events are remembered with higher confidence, more vivid detail, and greater subjective certainty than neutral ones. But that confidence is not the same as accuracy. Researchers studying flashbulb memories, those vivid, absolutely certain memories of where you were when something major happened, have found that even these degrade in accuracy over time, while the feeling of certainty remains intact. People who gave accounts shortly after major public events showed significant factual errors when interviewed months later. The confidence was the same. The memory had quietly changed. The feeling of certainty is not a signal of truth. It is a signal of emotional intensity. Your brain remembers how important something felt. Then it fills in the details accordingly. And if the emotional stakes are high enough, your brain will protect the meaning of the memory even at the cost of the facts. Social psychologist Michael Ross at the University of Waterloo found in a 1989 study that people consistently recalled their past attitudes as more similar to their current ones than they actually were. When people changed their views, they rewrote their memory of their former position to make the change seem smaller. To preserve a sense of a consistent, coherent self across time, you are not remembering who you were. You are remembering a version of yourself that makes sense given who you are now. This is not dishonesty. It is your brain managing your identity, keeping the story clean, filling the gaps in your personal history with a version of you that holds together. Picture the early human in a small tribe where reputation was survival, a person whose self-narrative was incoherent, who could not maintain a stable sense of who they were and what they stood for, would have struggled to build alliances, earn trust, or lead others through danger. Consistency was not just a virtue. It was a social currency your ancestors could not afford to lose. Your brain is still protecting that currency. It edits your past to keep your present self intact. The modern world makes all of this harder. Every time you photograph an experience instead of living inside it, you are outsourcing the encoding to a device that does not understand context. Research by Fairfield University psychologist Linda Henkel in 2014 found that taking photos actually impairs memory for the objects photographed. The brain, knowing a record exists, reduces the depth of its own encoding. You have more photos of your life than any generation before you, and you may be remembering less of it. Social media adds another layer. Every time you share a memory, describe it, caption it, frame it for an audience, you are reconstructing it publicly, with social incentives shaping the reconstruction. The version you share is not the version you experienced. And over time, the version you shared becomes the version you remember. You are writing over your own footage with the edited cut. And the original is gone. So what does this mean for how you live? The certainty you feel about a memory is not evidence of its accuracy. The vividness, the emotional weight, the detail, none of these are reliable signals of truth. They are signals of how important something was to your nervous system, and how many times you have reconstructed it since. Other people's memories of shared events are not necessarily wrong, because they differ from yours. They reconstructed differently. Their gaps were filled differently. Two honest people can have genuinely incompatible memories of the same afternoon. And the story you tell about your own past. The sense that you have always been this kind of person, that story is partly something your brain wrote for you, to keep you moving forward with a self that makes sense. Memory does not just store your identity, it builds it. Memory and imagination are not opposites. They use the same neural machinery. They are both acts of construction. The only difference is what you are told about where they came from. When you remember, you are imagining the past. The ancient human on the savannah did not need a perfect record of what happened. They needed a usable story, one that extracted the lesson, preserved the identity, and pointed toward what to do next. You still carry that brain. You still carry that need. Your memories are not records of what happened. They are arguments for who you are. They shift when you shift. They protect what you need protected. They change when the meaning changes. You don't carry your past. You carry the story your brain keeps telling about it. And every time you remember, the story gets revised.